This is the news in brief from the United Nations. Global well-being is at risk, and it's in large part because we haven't kept our promises on the environment, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said on Thursday. The UN chief issued the stark warning to the Stockholm Plus 50 summit, which marks half a century since world leaders pledged to prevent nature loss so that humanity could enjoy peace, prosperity and sustainable development. Although there have been successes in protecting the planet since 1972, including rescuing the ozone layer, Mr. Guterres warned that Earth's natural systems cannot keep up with our demands. Lead us out of this mess, he urged delegates, in a call for action against our triple planetary crisis, comprising the climate emergency that's killing and displacing ever more people each year, biodiversity loss that threatens more than 3 billion people, and pollution and waste that's costing some 9 million lives a year. Among the UN chief's recommendations, he repeated his call to all countries to abandon fossil fuel subsidies and invest in renewable energy, and to developed nations to at least double support to poorer nations to adapt to a growing number of climate shocks. If we do these things, we can avert climate catastrophe, end a growing humanitarian and inequality crisis, and promote inclusive and sustainable development, he said. To the ongoing COVID pandemic, and new data from the UN Health Agency that suggests that people who've been infected with the Omicron variant can expect limited protection against catching it again. Latest evidence also suggests that immunity against severe COVID illness is more robust among those who've been infected by the coronavirus and vaccinated against it than it is for people who've only been infected or only been jabbed. The priority for national health agencies should be to vaccinate all adults, focusing on healthcare workers, people with low immunity and older persons, the World Health Organization said. To Cambodia, where the UN Rights Office OHCHR on Thursday condemned threats, intimidation and obstruction facing opposition candidates ahead of elections on Sunday. OHCHR said that candidates had faced restrictions and reprisals and that a number had been imprisoned. 4 days before the election, at least 6 opposition candidates and activists remain in detention awaiting trial, while others have gone into hiding, said OHCHR spokesperson Liz Throssell. The latest bout of political obstruction follows what Ms. Throssell called the systematic shrinking of democratic space in recent years, which has undermined fundamental freedoms and the right to participate in public affairs. Geneva is home to the world's top disarmament forum, and it's where recent missile tests by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, DPRK, were in the spotlight this Thursday. DPRK, or North Korea, faced criticism from mainly Western nations at the Conference on Disarmament, where it's presiding over a new session of discussions this month in line with the rotating presidency system. On behalf of dozens of nations, Australia announced that it was gravely concerned by the DPRK's continued efforts to make weapons of mass destruction and ballistic missiles, and by reports that the country was preparing to carry out its 7th nuclear test.
Since the beginning of 2022, the DPRK has conducted an unprecedented series of missile tests, including launches of intercontinental ballistic missiles, alleged hypersonic weapons, ballistic missiles with the stated intent for the operation of tactical nuclear weapons, and at least 1 submarine-launched ballistic missile. These tests are all clear violations of United Nations Security Council resolutions and demonstrate the DPRK's continued efforts to expand and further develop its ballistic missile capabilities.
France, representing the European Union, also condemned the unprecedented number of ballistic missile tests carried out this year and the resumption of work on the nuclear test site at Punggye-ri. North Korea's Han Tao-song rejected the criticism levelled against his country, saying there was nothing new in the allegations. Daniel Johnson, UN News. This is the news in brief from the United Nations. 100 days since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, UN humanitarians on Friday issued a fresh alert about the enormous needs there. At least 15.7 million people in Ukraine are in urgent need of humanitarian assistance. Ukrainians have also been displaced multiple times, and women are giving birth in highly dangerous conditions. Here's the UN Population Fund's Hemit Nadal speaking from Lviv in western Ukraine.
We have received reports and heard testimonies from doctors about deliveries, including C-sections, taking place in the basements of maternity hospitals, in shelters, and even in metro stations, while others took place in hard-to-reach areas, with gynecologists giving remote online instructions during childbirth to save the lives of both the mother and the newborn.
There are also serious concerns about rising global food insecurity as millions of tons of cereal remain blocked in Ukraine ports. Top UN officials have held talks in Moscow to facilitate the movement of grain and fertilizer from Russia, but the UN Crisis Coordinator for Ukraine, Amin Awad, told journalists in Geneva that there's no clear-cut solution emerging yet. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has welcomed the 2-month truce renewal in Yemen. He also urged the parties to implement the terms of the agreement without delay. The ceasefire between government-allied forces in Yemen and Houthi opposition fighters has also been welcomed by the UN Human Rights Office, OHCHR, which on Friday said that for the past 8 weeks, the people of Yemen have seen violence and hostilities decrease. Fighting escalated between Yemeni government forces, backed by a Saudi-led coalition, and the Houthis, also known as Ansar Allah, in 2015. Today, the country is in crisis, lacking food, healthcare and fuel, not least in the city of Taiz, said OHCHR spokesperson Liz Throssell, who urged the warring parties to make serious efforts to ensure that roads into the city are reopened.
Taiz has essentially been under siege by Ansar Allah since 2015. There is a current dire humanitarian situation there. People face huge challenges in getting water, buying food and accessing medical services.
The 8th round of talks on a new Syrian constitution between the country's government and opposition representatives ended on Friday in Geneva, where the UN negotiator leading the process has urged them to look for compromises to take the process forward. In a statement late on Friday, UN Special Envoy Geir Pedersen said that several areas of a potential new constitution for Syria had been discussed in Geneva all week, but work proceeded at a slow pace, Mr. Pedersen noted, adding that there was a continuing inability to identify and conclude concrete areas of provisional agreement. Delegates attending the discussions should try to work towards constitutional texts that would attract broad support among Syrians, he suggested, ahead of a 9th round of talks scheduled in the Swiss city late next month. Daniel Johnson, UN News.